Thanks for joining us for our Behind the Screen, How Superhuman Teaches AI to Understand You. My name is Dave Boland, and I am the Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer at Ogletree Deakins. Ogletree Deakins is a labor and employment law firm with over 1,100 attorneys located in North America and Europe. And for this session, we're also really big fans of Superhuman. So it's a real privilege here to be on this panel and to join this esteemed group. Most of us use AI every day, sometimes knowingly, often not. When it works well, it disappears into the background. When it doesn't, the friction is almost immediate. And that difference isn't accidental. Before we get into why, let me briefly introduce Superhuman for those of you who may be less familiar. Superhuman is the parent company of Grammarly, Coda, Mail, and Go, an AI productivity suite of agents and apps built around how you work, how you write, and the context you're working in. But today, we're not here to talk about the products. We're here to talk about the thinking behind them. When we talk about the way Superhuman makes AI, here's what we mean. Rather than asking you to go find the AI, open a chat window, write a prompt, copy and paste the result, Superhuman embeds a team of specialized agents and apps directly into your flow of work. It's AI that works where you already are and knows what you're trying to accomplish. But building it that way requires a constant stream of deeply human decisions, which signals to trust, where judgment stays with the person, what gets automated, and what never should. And that's what we're here to unpack today. A quick note, given our brevity of time together here, we won't be taking Q&A, but our panel has agreed to stay a little afterwards. If you do have questions, feel free to come up and ask. So let's start by introducing our speakers and their respective roles here at Superhuman, and we're going to start on the far side here with Stefanie.
Hello, it's so great to be here. I'm Stefanie Tignor, and I lead data science at Superhuman. So my background is in data science, but I come to data science through psychology, and in a former life, I was actually a professor, and in academia, I was studying how we can use data and machine learning to predict and understand human behavior and communication. And so when I'm doing my data science work at Superhuman, that focus on the human and focus on psychology really colors everything that I do. And so when I'm sharing results today and when I'm on the job, when I'm building products, I'm thinking about the data, but I'm thinking about what can the data teach us about humans and their communication and their lives on and off the screen. It's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Knar Hovakimyan. I'm an engineering manager at Superhuman. And I started at Grammarly, actually. I've been working on responsible AI for the past 6 years or so. I now lead a team of machine learning engineers and linguists and software engineers working on trust and making our AI do the things we want it to do and not do the things we don't want it to do. Before this, I had a background in linguistics and natural language processing.
And my name's Evan. I help lead our go-to-market and product marketing efforts working on the Coda product line at Superhuman. I actually came in through the acquisition last year. Was actually at the company for 9 years, or just over 9 years now. Started back when we were in stealth, and so I've seen kind of the whole journey from start to finish. And in my career, basically over the last around 20 years, I've been focused on every part of software development. I started my career in products, worked in pre-sales, post-sales, and one of the things I love about my job here is, product marketing, bringing products to market. It's about the story you tell, but it's also, in my mind, it's about how that story is delivered at every stage of the life cycle. So what does it mean when a customer actually takes the thing that you've sold them and finds that value that you described on a landing page or in an ad campaign? And so that's something that I find really, really exciting about the work at Superhuman and something I'd love to chat more about in our conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Evan. Well, let's get started here. I think we can all relate to the fact that we want AI to just work. When it actually feels that way at Superhuman, what's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, I can start here. And first, I just want to zoom out a little bit because I think it's really interesting, having worked in AI and machine learning for a long time, what people talk about when they talk about AI today is meaning a very specific thing. And that is because of what's really dominating the conversation right now, which is LLMs and this prompt-based AI, which for sure is super, super exciting. But that's actually only one type of AI. And often when we think about users and we talk to users and when we ask them what they think about AI, they're really thinking about that specific use case, right? Going to a chatbot, going to a surface that is a destination, entering a prompt, asking it to do something for me, and getting a response, or invoking an agent and then having it deliver. And that's really great and that's really exciting. But there's this whole other class of what we call assistive or almost invisible AI. And that's not destination-based. You're not having to go to a destination and say, here's what I want you to do for me. Will you do it for me? Yes or no? But it's actually assisting you and working in the flow of your work while you're already doing what you're doing and delivering on jobs that you already wanted it to deliver on. And when you have that assistive AI experience, it really feels like magic. And so some examples of that are, of course, the classic Grammarly product has been around actually for 16 years. And so I think it's really funny because sometimes when we talk about it today, people are like, how are you integrating AI into the classic Grammarly product that's been around for so long? And I laugh a little bit because it's always been AI. But people kind of don't know that it's AI, or they don't recognize it as AI these days. They don't call it AI, but it has always been built on a foundation of AI. And it's really invisible because it's just helping you do exactly what you wanted to do at the moment. The same can be said about a product like Google Photos, right? Like sometimes I'll open up Google Photos and I'll say, here's a beautiful memory. Today's your wedding anniversary. Here's a beautiful memory reel of you and your husband on your wedding day. And by the way, I know who you and your husband are from your photos. And I've pulled out all the blurry, ugly ones because I assume you don't want to see those. And I've only captured the magical ones. And I've really curated this list for you. That is also AI, but I didn't prompt it. I didn't ask about it. And so I think it's really interesting to think about that, like assistive AI when we talk about AI that just works, especially at the current moment, because we're in such a frenzy and people are so overwhelmed. So I don't know if you saw this research that came out recently from UC Berkeley, noting that people are feeling like AI is not helping their work, it's intensifying it. Because now all of a sudden I have all these new destinations that I have to go to. I'm using 5 to 8 different tools and I have to learn. I'm stressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to take a week off work just so that I can learn how to use these new systems and these new tools that my company wants me to use and go to these destinations and use them properly. And that's, as a scientist, I'm excited about that. That's interesting. Sure, yes, absolutely. But also I think it's really on us and a really strong responsibility of product makers and product builders to say, how can we actually make these systems not feel like work? And how can we make them not feel like I have to take a week off just to upskill every month because the pace is so fast, but instead it's just delivering me what we want in the moment.
Yeah, I like the example that you give around all of the work that goes in to make an AI experience like the sort of like photo memory thing feel just magical and natural. I think that is very real in responsible AI because a lot of the work we do is in the background. It's not obviously visible to users, but it leads to a really streamlined experience. So a user, if we're doing our jobs well, a user isn't going to notice that, hey, the AI could have done something bad in this instance, but it didn't do it. Or a user isn't going to notice that, you know what, this could have been incorrectly blocked, but it actually just let me pass this prompt through, or whatever it is. And in the background, there's so much work that goes into that between aligning the models, defining our policies, building extra models that go on top of the AI. All of this stuff just makes this seamless experience for users. And that's just one facet, right? I know like your team works on quality. There's a ton of quality work that goes into there, but at the end of the day, the user just gets something that feels a little bit more magical.
I'd even add to I love the Google Photos example as well, because it's also it's a story of context. Like how much context are you giving to these tools so that they can be effective at doing their job, but also do it in a way that feels non-invasive and not kind of in your face with what it knows about you. I think one of the interesting things we've been building over the past year is, how do you introduce the concept of context, especially in a team or an enterprise environment where it is incredibly important that you know the facts about how the organization works and what is the source of truth and how do the different team members work with each other. And I think that's the more fascinating kind of progression is in a team and enterprise context, you have to bring all of those context together of the individual and of the team, which is something I think we've been working a ton on.
I think on this topic of visibility, Evan, it'd be great if you could share maybe a specific example of where you have made the decision to make AI less visible, and how did that play out? What were the advantages in doing so?
Yeah, I think an interesting example here is a project, one of the first ones we did when Coda was acquired last year. We were looking for kind of the first joint development work between Coda and Grammarly to sort of materialize some of the vision we had been building. And for those who may not know, Grammarly, while it's the assistant that works everywhere that you work, it also has an editor product called Grammarly Docs, which has existed for a while. It's not been kind of a primary thing that's been pitched to audiences of Grammarly because people like to work in their different environments, but it's a tool that's extremely helpful at kind of giving you this first-party experience for revision, where it has dedicated real estate for going through all the different proofreading things that you want to get done and feel like you're going through the checklist and building confidence in the result of what you've built. And for those who don't know Coda's background, Coda is an all-in-one collaborative workspace product. So we bring the best of documents, spreadsheets, applications into one surface. And it felt very natural for us to start working together on the future of this product, of this Grammarly Docs experience. And we got very excited. I think one of the things that we've built a ton of in Coda's context in our history, one of the things we try to solve for users is to complete workflows end to end. So everything from the ideation to the actual finished product. In workplace context, product teams that have to deliver features have to write specs, they have to track progress, they have to build marketing material, they have to launch, they have to track all of the results of that. So creating one single place to do it. And at the time when we looked at the behavior inside of Grammarly Docs, it was, well, I go to my LLM and I type a prompt to generate ideas for an assignment maybe that I'm working on. Then I go to my document editor like Google Docs and I start writing that assignment end to end. And then I massage that and I get feedback. And then I go and paste all of that into Grammarly Docs and I get this really rich experience of proofreading and getting all of that feedback. And once I burn that down, I copy paste it back into Google Docs, and then that goes out to my professor. We're like, there's got to be a better way to do this, and Coda has already built a lot of that foundation. And so we started doing this development project, and a few things we invested in. One is we built out this kind of chat experience that already existed in Grammarly Docs, but we added more of an AI kind of component, more of a composition assistant, so that when you get into the editor, it starts to prompt you with like, hey, what do you want to write? How can we help you write that? We separated the Grammarly experience into different agents that basically express the value of each of those agents independently. So it's like, we don't just do proofreading, we also help you review your writing from the context of what your professor might say. And those types of things, we were getting very excited, and we started getting into experiments with users, and we started getting immediate feedback of like, whoa, there's like, what is this AI thing? Like, why are you telling us about AI? Like, we're here for revision. We're here for this specific job to be done. And I think that we sort of got into that headspace that a lot of product companies get into. It's like, oh, everybody wants this. It's like really helpful. It's going to be really great. And what we really needed to do was find the way of bringing that functionality in line with how the user works, not interrupt them, but do it in kind of the flow of their writing. Make sure that we're providing value, but being somewhat in the background in that process. And so, we did a bunch of things like the way that we decorate text inside of the Grammarly Docs experience. You have different ways of seeing the different feedback from different agents. We have this new product we've been working on called Idea Bar, which is basically as you're typing, it starts to generate some ideas for how you build context and additional connection to your work and add more flexibility. And it's like less like autocomplete, but more like, if you want to take advantage of this, you can. We're here for you, but you don't have to focus on it. And of course, there's a lot of balance there, but it's been a really exciting project, and I think a way for us to figure out, what does it mean to kind of blend the line or balance the line of, it's there to offer you assistance, but it's in the background when you don't need it to be there.
That's great. And when things are happening behind the background, it can raise some questions around trust. And Knar, given your expertise in this area, when do you see that when AI is quieter or more invisible actually impact trust? Does it reduce trust? And how do you decide when it matters?
Yeah, this is definitely an important question. And I think, there's sort of layers of protection that we put into place in our product. So what I talked about before, sort of the invisible layer of how do we just make this AI experience overall as safe and effective as it can be, that's just one layer of building a safe and trustworthy product. If you stop there, you haven't done enough, because at the end of the day, we can build a general experience, we can build a model that will work in most contexts with most texts, but we're building something that many different users use in different industries, in different contexts. And at the end of the day, providing those users control over that experience is going to make the product work better. So in order for users to have control, there needs to be transparency. They need to know when they're using AI. They need to know as much as they can in a healthy user experience about how that AI works, how it makes decisions, where it works, so that they can decide for their context, for their industry, is this how I want to use it, right? So providing that transparency and control and making that visible in that end user experience is also really important for building out a trustworthy product.
That's great. And so in making those decisions, Stefanie, can you think of a time that maybe Superhuman made an early assumption about how people would want AI to help them that turned out to not be the right decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of two, I'll share two related examples. So the first is from students. Students are a really key user group for us. They love Grammarly. They love using it for their assistive writing. And so when we were thinking about building out these new generative AI features within Grammarly, we were thinking about students, and we were thinking from this assumption of, okay, so of course, students are going to want us to generate their essays for them from scratch. So we're going to do that. And then what should we do next? Because obviously students are going to want that because they have an essay due tomorrow. They need to save time. And what we found was we did this deep UXR, our UXMR team did this fantastic research called Desk Diaries. They were live with students. They were looking at how they were actually doing their schoolwork day to day. And what they found was only 19% of students wanted AI to generate something for them from scratch, which like totally blew my mind, because I was thinking back to when I was in college and I was like, oh my gosh, deadline's due tomorrow. Like, let's just get this thing rolling. Let's just get something on the paper and then I can edit it. And most of the students we talked to said, that's not how I want to use AI. Like, I don't want AI to just generate something for me from scratch. I want it to be an assistant. I want it to edit my work. I want to use it for brainstorming. I want it to go back and critique it. And so that was really eye-opening to us to say, oh, we actually need to build AI in a different way for students because we're not thinking about their needs properly. And that was really eye-opening. The second example that I want to give is about suggestion quality. So we have our classic Grammarly suggestions, and on the data side, of course, we're tracking sort of how popular and how effective are each of these suggestion categories. So within Grammarly, you can get punctuation corrections, you can get tone suggestions, rephrasing, and we categorize these and we look at, okay, how often are people actually accepting these suggestions? And so we were doing what I would think would be an extremely boring project, where we were saying, okay, let's just take the bottom, we got to look at the bottom few categories of suggestions where people look at them, but they never apply them. And then probably we could maybe deprecate those, get rid of them, or edit them in some way. So let's just cut off these like very bottom performing suggestion types. And what we found was that actually made the product experience worse and made outcomes worse when we got rid of those poorly performing suggestions. We're like, why on earth would that be the case? Well, because people were looking at them but not applying them because they wanted to use them for inspiration. They were like interesting, sort of out there suggestions, maybe about tone or about clarity or rephrasing. And people wanted to look at it and go, oh, that is interesting. I don't want to exactly do that, but that's really helpful for me to guide how I'm writing in this document. And so people really highly valued these suggestions. And that was like super counterintuitive to us because we thought just cull them, get rid of them, no one's accepting them. But people really want to be able to see AI suggestions, not necessarily just like blanket apply everything. And I think together these examples and what we were talking about earlier about like AI that just works is it highlights a really interesting tension where truthfully most products are failing right now, which is that people want AI to just work, but they also want to feel like the author. And that's like a really hard boundary and a really hard line to sort of straddle when you're thinking about how can I have AI that just works, just does stuff for me, but not too much because I really want to be in control and in the driver's seat and feel like the author.
Yeah, I feel like control is, I mean, in the Grammarly docs is heavily used by students, and so a lot of the research similarly was like, it yielded this idea of I want control over my writing about the output, I want to build confidence. And one of the learnings there as well was like related that the UX of how AI interacts with you matters a ton, and there are many different ways to do that so that it actually meets the needs of the user. Like we had an experience where the original Grammarly docs panel on the side would have a list of all of the suggestions and a proofreading list of things that you could go tick off. And people would just progressively go through that list and work down to 0. And it was like an inbox 0 experience for the proofreading. And we had kind of made this adjustment where we're like, oh, we want to deliver all of the feedback in line with the text because that kind of mirrors the experience we expect people from the early research to work alongside you versus in this. And people were immediately like, hey, I need my checklist. Like, give me the checklist of all of the proofreading suggestions because I want to work through that in this specific way. And I think, you have to, as we're designing these products, you have to kind of account for, each job to be done has its own expectations. We need to meet users where they are, not just like in line with the work that they're doing, but also create those experiences that kind of drive them and motivate them and get them excited. And that's been one of the really exciting investments we've been making in this.
I think your comment about wanting to be in control, for those of you who were at the previous session with Rajiv, I think he was talking about being the conductor and having that control and be able to make those decisions. And you all are enabling that through the products. Stefanie, one other thing here, as you were talking about that, what's something that teams often misunderstand about how people build trust with AI tools, and how did that insight really impact or change how Superhuman designs its AI?
Yeah, I think one thing about trust, obviously we want to think a lot about building trust with our AI tools. It's also important to note that sometimes people trust them too much, and that is something that you have to take into account. So we find, we're monitoring the quality of our suggestions. All AI makes mistakes, so we're thinking about, is this an accurate suggestion? We're constantly monitoring that. And we find that a large proportion of the time, users are accepting incorrect suggestions. So we've given them a suggestion and they're like, great, I trust this product so much, apply it. That's a really serious responsibility that we really have to look out for. And so when you're thinking about building trust, it's both making sure people trust you to come to you and do the job that you want them to do in an assistive way, and still letting them be in the driver's seat. But it's also just taking the responsibility of the product super seriously, because we've seen if you're so assistive, if you're so in the flow of work, it can be really easy for people to go on autopilot, and you want to make sure that you keep that really, really high quality bar.
And just to add to that, I think that goes back to the question about transparency and user control, because the more you can tell the user about the limits of the product and how it works, the better they can make decisions. If you never tell the user where the AI is working, where it might be limited, right? Like maybe there's less factual, or maybe there's data that's not factual that's coming out, then they can't decide that I need to double check this because they might not know. So I think transparency also goes through just communication to the user about what to expect.
Knar, I think along those lines, with context, where do AI systems most often misread human intent? Do you see that? And then how does that impact the design choices to help avoid those issues?
Yeah, I think a really common issue is someone asking an AI system for something with missing context, and then the AI just responds based on a ton of assumptions, right? So I can go and just say, write me a short bio. And it will do it, even though it doesn't know who I'm not important enough that it's been trained on data about my biography, right? It doesn't know who I am, but it will write something. And I think that's kind of an obvious example. I wouldn't use that prompt because I'm not expecting the AI to have the information. But I think this rears its head in more subtle ways too, where we might be asking things and without realizing, not providing the necessary context for the AI to complete that request. The issue here is that the way these systems are often designed, it just complies anyway, right? And I think that this is not an ideal user experience. I think instead what could work really well is, let's say I said, write me a bio. It can follow up and say, okay, give me some information about your job and your background, and I will put together a bio for you. Note that there's still a lot of assumptions made. Like, I'm not telling it how long is the bio, or what style is it in, what context is it for. All of these things would make a better outcome, but the difference is that some assumptions are kind of safer for the model to make, and other assumptions can be riskier. If it's making assumptions, for my resume about my work background, and then I submit it without looking, I may have just lied to a potential employer, versus if it's just writing in a different style than might have been ideal. So I think part of the trust work there is kind of defining what are these high-risk cases, right? How can we help the users do better and put reins in on our model to do better? But then what are the sort of lower risk cases where we can give the user that magical feeling where something was done without them having to specify too much? And so I think of a user experience here, where the model can go in and ask follow-up questions. It can admit when it doesn't know. And even if it is sort of automatically complying with something, it can explain where it made its assumptions. It can say, hey, I made this bio for you because I guessed based on your email address where you work and what your job looks like. And I do think, yes, the technology is not fully transparent yet. There's a lot of work being done on AI explainability. We're not there yet. But even today, you can build a better product experience around that, actually.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I think in a team and enterprise context too, it's like even the disclosure of which tools that it has access to as a system of record of information, builds trust with okay, if I'm a salesperson, I'm asking a question about an account, I better see that Salesforce is sourced in the response, that it has all the information that I'm pulling, and it's not coming from some random other artifact that was documented internally. And I think a lot of the connector technology we've been building is partially trying to enable that trust at a scale beyond just kind of even the consumer use cases where you're trying to work through those things.
Just to add quickly too, you see that in the data a lot. You have these camps of people obviously we're all in the AI space, so we're super excited about all this technology. We're thinking about where is it going to go next? We're deeply involved. There's a large percentage of people at organizations and at enterprises, the data shows, that are just using AI essentially like a Google search, where they're just saying, how could I do this thing? And maybe submitting a super generic prompt. And so I also think it's on us when we're designing systems to make it really easy and intuitive for people to get that context, to build that trust, and just to make a better product experience so people trust it again in the future. Looking at, maybe a very novice beginner user of AI, they might not understand what is possible and what delightful experiences will result when you have all those MCPs set up, when you have all this data and this context integrated in a really seamless way. Then it's knowing you much better. And I think that some of the divide we're seeing in adoption often boils down to, are you using sort of this very generic approach, or are you using a contextualized one?
Yeah, I think that's also really important from a trust perspective too, because when you release something that's really generic and it can do anything in any language, that usually just means it's less specialized in all of those things, and you have sort of less control over it. And I think there's something to be said for a more intentional experience, where you take a technology like that and kind of rein it in and focus it in on one goal, right? So you take an LLM that can respond to any request and you say, I'm going to make this really good at revising text. What you do in that process is you actually can, when you're focusing in, improve how it performs in that area while also making it safer, because you've thought through that experience, you've built safeguards around it, you've made it work well there versus just letting it go.
And one last thing, by the way, that's what we see that users want. That has also been very counterintuitive when we're building out new agents for our agent bench, and we're thinking, okay, probably people want just something to do everything for them, of course. Do my job for me, do all the tasks that I have to do today. And what we see is that people really want specificity. They have a specific job to be done. They want that job to be done effectively. And that specificity, it builds trust. It's also just more engaging for the users.
Yeah, like writing as starting with the concept of, oh, we're building a tool for writing. It's like, okay, what kind of writing? Like, are you a student writing an essay, or are you a professional writing a product brief for a new launch strategy that you're building? And like, the more we've tailored our approach internally to sort of understand the edges of those use cases and the needs, it's like a better product experience, but again, it's more, you can build trust in that the product actually knows what you're trying to achieve with it, with some defaults in mind, versus just kind of applying generic approaches to everything.
It's great. I've been so impressed with all three of these individuals. I've gotten to know them over the last week or so. And what you understand about AI and what it can do and the possibilities is, well beyond anything I can articulate. But in seeing that, would love to hear each of your perspectives. What is it that AI can't do right now that you wish it could? Where does it fall short? Where is it not meeting your expectation?
I have a very specific product idea that I want from AI, and if anyone in this room is this is a free one. Find me is a freebie. I think it's not surprising given that my psychology background and data background combined, but I still feel like there are a lot of gaps when it comes to simulated panel data, like understanding what humans are going to do and how they're going to react and what they're going to say at scale in a simulated fashion. So you can ask, Claude, ChatGPT, Superhuman, Go, what do you think of this thing? And it'll give you an answer. But the specificity of how humans respond to a survey and what they're going to do next and sort of what they're going to think about things, how they're going to react. I would love an environment to just more readily test that when I'm developing products or when we're developing marketing ideas. Hey, throw this out there. How do people react? Oh, no, not great. Okay, pivot. And can we specifically engage in different types of user audiences? Something like that I'm just really excited about and interested in from the human behavior perspective and from the building trust perspective. So that's something that I'm very eager for, both for the work context and for my personal life. I want to know how people are going to react to things.
I think it would be cool to have AI, different models with very different backgrounds and personalities. I think right now, basically all of our LLMs are kind of trained on the same data, which is everything on the internet. And then kind of they're tuned to sort of align, with the behavior that the creators want, which again is also kind of, only put out safe output, whatever it is. I think it would be interesting to build something an expert in a field doesn't actually know everything. They know really deeply something in their field, and they're probably kind of opinionated about it. And they might be opinionated about things that are sort of up in the air, that there's not a lot of evidence for, whatever it is. I think it would be cool to have different experts. And this goes kind of hand in hand with what you're saying, because in order to have a panel, you couldn't use the models we have today. You'd need to have models that not even at a prompt level, at a deeper level, had different data to train on. I kind of think of raising a kid. You wouldn't just give them everything in the world to read, right? You would give them a subset of things that you thought were valuable for them to learn from, and then at some point they'd develop their own opinions, and then they'd go deeper in one area and they'd start reading more, and all of that gives them personality. But we don't do that with AI. We just give it as much of everything as we can, and I would love to see what models look like that are a lot more curated. Yeah.
I love that. We were talking about this backstage, and I was saying I want a situation where it's I'm going to a wedding and so I want critiques on my outfit, but I don't want them from everybody. I want them from women who work in fashion in New York and editors of Vogue. What are their expertise saying about this outfit? That type of sort of curated expertise I think would be so, so cool.
Evan, how about you?
Mine is less. So it's funny. I have this daily podcast that I listen to that explains AI news of the day, and I feel like I've conditioned myself to expect every day is a new model release, a new whatever version, and it's everybody talking about when is AGI coming? What's that milestone? And the more I've thought about it, and the more that I've listened to other podcasts about how teams and enterprises are deploying these tools, it's it's already very powerful. There's already a lot of things that you can do with it. And so the thing that actually excites me most is less the like, when's the next capability that's going to be released or available, but more how do we take the really interesting things that teams, organizations, individuals are doing with these tools, and how does that then up-level the entire, the world of knowledge workers and people in companies, like do their best work. Coda's always had this, thesis from the very beginning that, we're building a product that is comprised of building blocks, and our goal is to enable people to use those, but we're not going to be hyper opinionated about their use because we're going to be surprised by what people build and construct with these tools. And so I'm very excited to see how, platforms like Superhuman, but like others, are able to kind of educate the broader market on like, here are the best use cases with the tools we have today. Like, don't wait for the next model release to go and do this new thing. Like, how do you actually take advantage? Because it is, there's no end in sight of the research projects about like, enterprises don't get a ton out of the product yet. There's an ROI gap, and I feel like that's like a missing piece in all of this, is like really concrete examples that can be repeated in various environments.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I do
Please.
think like we do have a blank canvas problem.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, oh, now we have such a easy user interface for really advanced technology because you use natural language that we already know. But at the same time, you go to an LLM or you go to an AI model that can do so many things, but you might not know what it's good at or bad at, or you might not think to use it for a certain use case. And so I think that's actually a different kind of challenge to users. And we need to find that sweet spot of, giving users inspiration, making it sort of clear what they can do and letting them go from there.
Yeah, I'll give a recent example. We had our sales kickoff, internal sales kickoff 2 weeks ago in Dallas, and we woo Dallas. It was interesting. So Coda recently released an MCP. We've been kind of in beta with that with a bunch of customers. I've been excited to sort of see how they're using it, and it's sort of like, again, a building block tool that can be applied to many different problems. And one of the most passed around demos around that time was from a sales engineer who just was like so excited about this tool that he built this combination of Glean and Coda and a few other products, and turned it into this like automatic prospect call generation tool that he built in sort of an afternoon, and then suddenly was on stage at SCO because we were like, this is so cool, you have to talk about it. And now like the entire sales team is like, oh, that's a pattern I can like, they don't have the blank canvas problem anymore. They're like, oh, this is a thing that is a pain point that I have. I don't have time to really learn AI in my day-to-day. I have to go call prospects. I have to go close deals. But this is like a really tangible thing that somebody in my reference network, my team, has built, and has presumably built with a knowledge and context of the way that we work uniquely at Superhuman. And then, that was out in the open, and everyone started picking it up and using it. So it's like those types of cases where you like also get that reference network context of like, I trust this source because it's somebody who works with me every day. So here's the thing that they're using.
One of the things that I hear you saying collectively here, in some ways, is like you don't have to be 100% right, but the premium of being able to get feedback from users and quickly adjust and adapt, that skill of agility actually is more important than being 100% right, having that responsiveness. And so very impressive. And along those lines, you've shared with us how Superhuman looks at evolving their tools and advancing their tools. Maybe speak a little bit about what's one signal you now look for when deciding whether an idea for a new AI tool fits into real work or it's just going to get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sales example is really salient here. Of like you just have to see how. I mean, like any product inside of an organization, you want to like see what the uptake is and see how organically people start engaging with it. I think there's no end to training programs and boot camps, and like for sellers in the field, they have an enablement team that builds training that gets delivered, and they have to be certified, et cetera. But it's like the day-to-day things that surprise you, those metrics that you may not have been looking for that are like, oh, now I see that 10 different sales engineers have picked up this tool, and now 10 of them have built out a different version of it that is specific to them. Like, you just start following the breadcrumbs to kind of the source. And I think in this world, we're going to find that there's more unique solutions than there are common solutions. So it's like we have to accept that we're going to be building many different experiences on top of these core products. But I've found that it's, honestly, it's a very human experience of just going and talking to the people who are using it, like finding where those organic paths are happening, and then just finding the sales engineer Ryan and like getting on a call with him and being like, how did you find this? Like, what was your experience? Like, so much of this you can choose to relegate to data, but you, like, at the end of the day, you want to find out those insights directly from the source. And that's what I've been most excited to follow it up.
Oh, that's great. Anything to add on?
I'll just add, it always, for me, comes back to thinking about user needs and the user and putting the user first. Like, I think a lot of times in this excitement, we're all so excited about new technology, but what is the user looking for? What is the user trying to do? Deeply thinking about user research, data that you're seeing about what are the actual jobs to be done, what are the actual user needs and user pain points. In all of the excitement, we have to constantly, it's important to remind yourself to come back to those core principles because they're still more relevant than ever, even with all of the AI.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, I see we're about at time, so I'm going to ask one more question to each of our panelists. Just to be transparent, they haven't seen this question before, so they may need a little time, but it's a softball question here, actually. And I think as I hear just the excitement level that you all talk about, the roles that you have, just what is it that excites you the most about what you see on the horizon in this space? And probably 30 seconds or less. So who would like to go first?
I have an idea. So I can go. I think working in the area of trust and responsible AI is very interesting right now because everything's happening right now. And a lot of what is done today is setting the precedent of how we think about this technology, what kinds of things we tolerate or don't tolerate. And it's exciting to have a voice in that. And some of it is looking out there and saying, okay, what's going on? Like, what are people okay with? What is our risk tolerance here? We know these models don't behave 100% correctly, but like, where is that level that is okay, right? Those are the kinds of questions that my team has to answer, and it's really tough, but it's really also just setting the stage for how this technology will continue to develop.
I think I'm most excited for the democratization of data. Like I've spent my career, learning how to write very complicated SQL and program very complicated models. And I think it's interesting and exciting and scary. It's both of those things to think about how all of my company and people can become more data literate, and like it is both very exciting to think about and also important to think about the responsibility that comes with that, and how can we teach the next right skills is an interesting problem to think about. If we have more access to data, how do we teach more critical thinking about interpreting that data? How do we democratize more of that knowledge to accompany it as well?
Yeah, I'd say, Coda's history, like one of our early taglines was, we enable people to build docs as powerful as apps. There's always this thesis of like, if you give all these different tools to people, they can actually turn their individual work process into software. Like they can, basically our tool should enable you to turn the workflow that is very unique to your team, that is the thing that keeps you going, that makes you productive, but is also very unique to your own experience, into a tool. And I think now more than ever, that's actually a reality that we're heading towards, where there's a lot of people writing about, oh, is it the end of SaaS? Is there like a software going away? And I think I don't think that's true. I think there's durable, trustworthy software will have to exist to help people work together. But I do think these more ad hoc experiences where it's like, generate me something, like if I'm looking at a dashboard of user research and I want to start interrogating that, but I also want to bring in some of my colleagues who are working on this product and I want to have them weigh in and work together, that I can on the fly generate sort of a tool that does that. I feel like those are the types of use cases that really get me excited is, now software is not this like rigid construct of we have these tools and you buy them and then you deploy them and then it's like this whole thing. You get this opportunity to sort of kind of on the fly, based on your unique needs in that moment for that job you're trying to do, can generate this tool that is ready for you, ready for your team, ready for your work. So I'm really excited about that.
That's great. Well, as the old guy on the stage here, I can tell you I've never been more excited about what's happening. I can't think of another time in my career where there's been this much excitement about what's on the horizon. So thank you all for joining us today, and I want to please join me in thanking Evan, Knar, and Stefanie on our panel here today.
Thank you.